So you've decided you want to run a campaign in Monte Cook's awesome Ptolus City by the Spire. First, you have to determine how are you going to pronounce Ptolus. Like the P in pterodactyl, it's silent, so I'm going to go with Ptolus. That's how I've always said it. I've been running a campaign in Ptolus for over 3 years now. It's a play-by-post campaign, not a live action, so it's a little bit different. But my advice to new GMs and new players alike that are starting is going to be the same regardless of how you're planning on playing this campaign. So, hi, my name is Ellis Bennis. I built a Ptolus website. I've been running a Ptolus campaign, as I said, for over 3 years now. And I own a digital marketing firm called Floating Axe Technologies, and I have a cool little product called the Super Belt. So none of that matters to you. What really matters is you want to figure out how do you get started in Ptolus, whether you're the DM or you're the player, and I'm here to help you with that. So first, the number one resource that you're going to need is the book, the actual book from Monte Cook. It is currently available. You can buy the old versions in the 3.5 D&D version. They also have the new one. The Kickstarter is completed, and the 5e version should be coming out very soon. I built this really handy website. It's Ptolus, Ptol .us, and hopefully Monte Cook doesn't get angry. I've sent him the information about this, but most importantly, all of the information that's proprietary to the book is hidden behind a restriction, so where you can't see everything. This is also good for you GMs and players that don't want their fun spoiled, because they can come here and they can interact with the map, they can look at all the streets, they can zoom in and zoom out and see what's here. But if they click on something, if they try to delve deeper, delver, then that also will restrict them where they actually won't be able to get anything they're not supposed to. There is the full player's guide to Ptolus. So the main reason I built this website was simply because I was so tired of dealing with the PDFs. If you guys are like me, you probably run a game on your phone, or you're checking your phone, or you're trying to use your phone or a tablet or whatever, and scrolling through a PDF is not super helpful. I also built in the search feature. So first, we'll start with the player's guide. I'll run you down through here. So this is the full player's guide. The same way you can compare. I actually have the PDF version of it here. This is completely free. Monte Cook himself made this available for free for players to download, so there's no copyright infringement here at all. But I took all of that and I turned it into a web accessible format, so you can click, load this on a mobile device, on a tablet, whatever you want, and you can navigate through everything that's in the player's guide is right in here. So first, DMs and players alike, I would say start right here. Start with the player's guide to Ptolus. And basically, it's going to be a little bit of heavy lifting, but start reading this. Read all of the player's guide. So DMs, you're thinking, oh, well, I just need to read the full listing and the full book and everything that's involved. But it's also going to be really important that if you give this to your players, you want to know what they know. The PDF clocks in at about 34 pages, so it's not a really light read by any stretch of the imagination, but it's also not overly cumbersome. And so, again, as a DM, you don't want to be thinking about, oh, well, I know this because I'm the DM, but what do my players know? This is a great reference. You can always come back here, check through here. If you look at the Balakazar crime family, then you look at this reading, well, this information is all that your players are going to have about that crime family. Obviously, you're going to have a lot more information than that. So this way you can look and say, what do my players know by default? So like I said, start with the player's guide right here on the Ptolus website. DMs. In order to get deeper access to this website, you do have to register by contacting me, the site owner, and proving to me that you actually own the Ptolus book. I'm doing this so if Monte Cook ever gets upset with me for building this website, I can show him I have never given his information away. So you'll see here, take a photo of the book with a note and the date and time that you submitted this form. I save all of those. I will give you DM access. Obviously, if you're a player, don't get into the DM access. It's just going to ruin the fun for you. This setting, the Ptolus setting, is absolutely the best D&D supplement I've ever seen. And if I can humbly say, this interactive system that I've built is so much better than just trying to leaf through the book. Have the book, that's fantastic. If you're like me, you do almost everything digitally, so you've got PDFs or whatever. But the website is searchable, and the coolest part to this, to me, is this interactive map. This will work on mobile, but it's a lot harder to do this and zoom in and zoom out on the map in terms of whether you print the whole thing and put it on your wall, but more likely you have the book. Well, you can't pinch and zoom and scroll around and stuff like that to figure out where you're going to go. You can even come over here and look if you're in the docks quarter, or where they're probably going to spend the majority of their time is in that midtown and in like the southern market over here. So like you can come in here and you can click on any of these things, but you can also come up here and type into the search right in here, and it's only going to show you the pins that are on the map. So, for example, the Ghostly Minstrel. You start typing ghost, it's the first thing that comes up. When I click this, you're going to see, boom, it automatically zooms in on the map. If you are a DM, you can click on the More button, and this is going to load specific information about the Ghostly Minstrel. I have almost the entire book is in here, but this has been by far my favorite feature, is that I can look on here and see, okay, the Ghostly Minstrel is here. My adventurers are leaving from here. They're going over to St. Gustav's Chapel. They're coming down to the bathhouse. Well, I know I'm coming down Center Street. Okay, we're coming down here. Ooh, Romoro's Bakery. I want to write and say they can smell how delicious it is. And then they come all the way down in here to the Star Crossing Plaza to maybe visit Nevaeh and Bowcraft, maybe to go to the Rogue Moon Trading Company, look for job, visit the Starry Night, etc., etc. This is really the reason I started with the website, and just it's branched out from there to where hopefully you have almost the entire book in a mobile format on here. All right, you've got this far, so now the question really is, how do you start? If you have no idea what to do or how to start with Ptolus, if you've never been involved in Ptolus before, then my number one recommendation is that you have your player characters start A, at first level, and B, start from outside the city. Do not try to cram all the information into your head and say, I'm playing somebody that's lived here for multiple years. I will say that's something that we actually did. We actually took, and one of my PCs that started the game, my very first PC in the game, he actually played a female that was an adopted child in House Cath, which is, they're very musical and they're bards basically, and she is a bard. So that complicated things exponentially because there's all this information that she grew up in the city that she should have known. Well, neither the player nor myself had ever played in Ptolus before. So it was a little bit of a stutter step. The way that we handled that personally was we actually said she'd been gone from the city for several years, that she was there, she grew up, she was young, and so when she came back, it allowed me to introduce some new things to say, this has changed, this is different. But if you're starting out fresh, if you've never played in Ptolus before, if your players have never played in Ptolus before, then start them out as first level adventurers and start them outside of the city. Start them where they've heard about Ptolus. Maybe you can give them a few tidbits of information and stuff like that. That would make it even easier on them, that you say, don't even read the player's guide yet. You don't know anything about this city, and then you as the DM, or as I like to call myself, I always say narrator instead of GM or DM. I always like just the phrase narrator. So that's where I would say start. First level, outside the city. Maybe they live in a small town near the city. Maybe, they've grown up 10 miles away, 20 miles away, 30 miles away, whatever. There's the awesome Bay of Ptolus, so maybe they came in on a ship and they're experiencing Ptolus for the first time. That's where I would start, because this is an 800-page book. The depth of information that Monte Cook and his team have provided is absolutely mind-blowing. There are hundreds of locations. Most of those locations have adventure hooks, NPCs, even plot tie-ins together. There's dozens of organizations between the 10, actually 11 noble houses, and then there's all the crime organizations, there's all the good, the bad organizations, all these factions. I mean, there is so much depth to this setting. That's why I recommend both as you as the DM and as your players, say that you know nothing about Ptolus. Okay, say that they are coming in for the first time, because if they're trying to come in with this perception that they know things about the city, that they've been in the city for a number of years, but the players don't know anything about it, then it's a little disjointing. And so that's one of the things that we did. We had one PC that was from Ptolus, but then all of the others came from outside and they started after, and it was much easier for us to start with them having no assumptions about what was going on in the city, knowing anything about the city. And then it allowed us to met out that information as we went. And we both kind of learned at the same time, because I had to learn as the DM all this 800 page book, and my players had to learn a lot of that stuff going along and going down through the city and just delving deeper and deeper into the city. Now, to get a little bit more specific from both a DM perspective and a player perspective about how to start. One of the best ways to start is right there in the dead center of Midtown. Just go straight to, boom, Delver's Square. The Ghostly Minstrel is one of the most fleshed out pieces of the whole website. They've got and the whole book. They have even a full menu for the Ghostly Minstrel. They've got photos of the inside. They've got NPCs that are fleshed out about it. Also, most of the really high profile NPCs that your players are going to want to learn about and eventually interact with, they spend a lot of time in the Ghostly Minstrel. So for you as a DM and for your players just starting out, what I would do is read just a little bit about the gates, because they have several different places they can come in. They have the Market Gate, the South Gate, they have the Gilder's Gate. They could come in through the dock, or you could have them come in through the North Gate. That's the only gate in the north, is just the North Gate. They're not going to come in through Rivergate. They're not going to come in through Old Town. Those are all of the entrance points. For example, when I started my campaign, I had my people come in through the Market Gate, through Tent City. There's a really cool entry about Tent City that talks about the people that live there. And then I basically just described for them my hook, and I'll just give this away to you. My hook was for my PCs coming in. They had been on a caravan mission where they were doing caravan protection. They'd been away for several years. Like I said, they came in through Tent City, through the Market Gate, and they actually worked for Rogue Moon Trading Company. Now, this is the first time they'd been to the city in a number of years. Like I said, some of the other PCs that we introduced, they'd never been to the city before. Rogue Moon, this is their headquarters, but they had been working for Rogue Moon even outside of the city, because they have so much in terms of trading information. So my first description was coming up Penny Street. Then they went down the massive Center Street. I talked about Romero's Bakery, however you want to pronounce that. They could smell those sweet smells. They come down here to, you can see this is Friar Avenue, and then Tavern Street was really the one I was looking for there. There's the bathhouse there, so if they're just coming in from the city, they can hit up the bathhouse. They can come in and check into the St. Gustav's Chapel, and then there's a couple off the grid different taverns down here, like the Griffin. Actually, specifically, they don't like adventurers for the most part. They'll tolerate them, but if you start anything, then that's going to cause an issue. But inside here of Delver Square, you could spend probably a whole adventuring session right inside just Delver Square, because there's the Ghostly Minstrel, there's the Bull and Bear Armory where they can get stuff, there's the Watch House, which the watch is the City Watch, there's Potter's, which is just a little thing. Then we'll talk about Mayor's Oddities. They can buy and sell magic items. I'll talk about that here in just a second. Eber's Outfitters, they can buy about everything you can imagine in terms of dungeon delving equipment and stuff like that. Not armor or weapons, but everything else like that. Danbury's is another bar that caters to your arcane magic users. And then Raster's Weapons, which is where they do sell magic items, magic weapons. Bull and Bear sells magic arms and armory. And then, like I said, how do you pronounce that? Myrith's Oddities, they sell all kinds of magic stuff. One of the biggest things about Ptolus that might irritate you as a DM and that you're going to have to figure out is that they do have literal magic market shops. So not only does Oddities, Rasters, and then the Bull and Bear, all three sell magic arms, magic armor, and then magic items, as well as mundane items, but you can literally walk into Rasters and say, I want that +1 sword right there. I've heard a lot of DMs that talk about they don't like that. They don't believe that magic items should be for sale. That is really a big part of Ptolus, that they have that ability. Raster himself is a Litorian, which you'll learn about. They're like a lion people. He can actually hold a weapon and identify its magical properties, identify its level of enhancement, etc. And so that's something he can do. It's going to be up to you. If you want to change that, it's a big aspect of the game, and so it's kind of up to you on how you want to play that. Maybe Raster's weapons and Bull and Bear, and then the oddities. Maybe they only sell mundane, and then you have to work through another system in order. You have to hire somebody to get them upgraded, or you have to do it yourself, or whatever. That's up to you. The other thing is, right here inside of Delver Square is the access to what's called the Undercity. So just beneath this area is a whole nother marketplace, which is where almost all the Delvers go. And so I won't go into much more detail there, but that's what I was saying. Have them start outside the city, have them come here, have them start at the Ghostly Minstrel. There's all kinds of plot hooks that you can do here. Like this or not, inside of the Undercity here, there is actually the Delvers Guild. Let me pull in a map, I'll show you. So here is the Undercity Market, and there is a Delvers Guild. Delvers is what the common term is to talk about people who go down into the dungeons beneath Ptolus. So even though Ptolus is a city campaign, there is a vast labyrinth beneath there. You could have your player characters spend all of their time delving into the dungeons below the city and literally never go anywhere else in the city except for up into Delvers, up into the Centertown Square where the Ghostly Minstrel is. Go to the Ghostly Minstrel, maybe go across the street to St. Gustav's, heal up and go right back down into the whole labyrinth. There's tons and tons of adventures written out for that, and you can absolutely do that. You could use Ptolus in only that capacity to use the labyrinths, or even run the endless dungeon underneath there. That's completely possible. Obviously, you're massively underutilizing the setting and all of the writing that's been going into it. But regardless, the guild office of the Delvers Guild, they literally have a board where people can post jobs. For you as a DM, this is the ultimate plot hook area where you can put anything that you want up there. You can see this help wanted ad. Well, they have just dozens of those in the Delvers Guild office. And so somebody could walk in there, they could see, hey, Black Dragon is harrowing a nearby town, or hey, a mage in Old Town needs help finding special somethings for their potion, right? All of those things you could literally just post on the guild office wall. Or you can do, the other stuff that us DMs do in terms of making all those hooks yourself and all that jazz. So the cool thing is they'll spend a lot of time there. So what I'm saying is you can just bring them right through the city, boom, right into the Ghostly Minstrel, and start them there, and then you could take them down into the Undercity, introduce them to the Delvers Guild office. They could become guild members or not. There's levels about that. It's really interesting. And then they could go right into a dungeon crawl. In the middle of the city, you could send them right into a dungeon crawl first day in Ptolus. Nothing else to do with the city. So, and not saying that you need to do that. There's an awesome adventure section that's chapter 33, I believe, in the book, that there's just fantastic adventure laid out that can take people from 1 all the way up to, I think, like 15th even, and that's all part of the core book. It does reference, there are 3 other adventure modules that Monte Cook wrote for this, and that I believe they are also translating into 5e. At the time of this, they're not done with all of that yet, but I believe they're doing that. There's the Bane Warrens, which is actually the whole reason the Spire exists, the huge spike that defines the city by the Spire. The Bane Warrens adventure is part of that. My party has ran through the whole thing of that. Amazing stuff. Awesome artwork, great plot hooks, very, very cool. And then the other one is Night of Dissolution. And so again, that takes them all over the city. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And then there's also one called Queen of Lies, which is a drow interaction thing where you spend a lot of time below the city. But the adventures in the book is a great way to get you started. There's a really cool guided approach to that. All of those additional adventures, my players started part of the Night of Dissolution, and they're getting ready to move into a little bit more of that. And the cool thing is, in 3 years of real life play, we've never left the city. And that just blows my mind, but there's that much depth to the book that even as a DM, it makes it so easy for us to look at all these plot hooks and look at all these NPCs and see all these relationships with all the different factions and organizations and other NPCs, that it makes it really easy that you don't realize that you've stayed in one city like your whole life. And that's really exciting. That's one of the most awesome things about Ptolus is the depth of that writing. I've never seen it in any other published adventure. I've been playing D&D for 20 years, and so I've never seen anything else to this level where you've got all these connection pieces that shows you all the relationships and all of the machinations going on in the background and all of these plot hooks. I mean, it's almost every single one of the published locations has a plot hook, has an interaction. And so it just makes it really easy for you as a DM to look at that and see, okay, well, which one of these are my players interested in? And in my opinion, even though you're in one city, in my opinion, Ptolus is amazing for sandbox play. That you can say, okay, go wander around the town, or you can lead by the nose and say, plot hook, plot hook, plot hook, and this is where you're going to go. So it will accommodate any style of play that you can imagine. All right, I've talked about a lot here. Any specifics in terms of what class can you play? Again, it's really wide open. There's nothing in Ptolus that sets it to where you can't play a class. So, for example, the first thing you might think is, well, can I play a druid or a ranger? Yes, you absolutely can. If I come up here, you'll actually check this out. The main is a really big area that's kind of like Central Park. Emerald Hill is super like Central Park that you can interact there. And then it's even really interesting. There's this really cool little island that actually a very high level druid lives here on Clathsmas Isle, right in the middle of this gigantic cemetery called the Necropolis. And so you can absolutely play a druid. There are druids that walk around through Ptolus. There are rangers that could come in here. You could also play the variant class of like an urban ranger or something along those lines. But every other class you can absolutely play. I don't see any restrictions. Ptolus is a high fantasy city. There are dragons flying overhead from time to time. There are flying airships. There's wizards flying through the air. It really, in my opinion, my favorite thing that unlocked my brain about this setting was that all of the stuff you read about in the player's handbook and in the DMG, you get to see that in Ptolus. So, for example, you could see a pair of orcs walking down the street just minding their own business because they live there. If you go into the oddities store, there's actually it's either a troll or an ogre that's his bodyguard that stays in there. So you walk in, you're like, this is normally a monster I would fight, but he's standing guard, watching over the whole store. And so there's really, you can play any race. There's literally tieflings that walk through the streets unchecked. And it's really all about that order and kind of like the balance of order and chaos in the city. But it's a very high magic setting, and so you'll have to adjust that one way or the other. You could strip all of that out if you wanted to. I don't recommend it because I think it's really exciting. There's even an apartment complex in the Nobles Quarter that actually is a completely flying building that just sits there and rotates of its own accord, floating up in the air. So there's so much in this that it allows, in my opinion, the full unlocking of the player's handbook and the DMG. So you can play any character class. Even, if you have an animal companion, it's not going to be completely out of the ordinary to see a male elf walking with a wolf. You know what I mean? Your animal companion is a lot better trained than a standard animal is, but that would not at all freak out the people of Ptolus. You might see two trolls walking down the road carrying a case or something between there. You might see an actual dragon flying overhead because there is a noble house composed almost completely of dragons and people from a dragon heritage. So there's just, the sky is the limit with the city, and that is why I love it so much, how I've been able to spend over 3 years playing in it. And the plot hooks and all the machinations and everything, you can play any kind of campaign in the city. You could be super political intrigue, barely ever have combat. You could be working with the noble houses. You could be working with any of the different organizations that are in the city. There's a magic organization. There's a bard organization. There's everything you can imagine. You could play a lawyer that handles disputes between the guilds. You know, I mean, there's anything you could imagine there from the role playing standpoint. The build that's already done, the amount of fleshing out that's already done is mind blowing. Or you can do none of that and just fight nonstop below the city, in the city, if you're careful. Obviously, there's a whole section on crime and law and on breaking the laws and on how all of that stuff is handled. And again, I love that Monte Cook handled this. There are 20th level characters walking around this city, and you might know who they are, you might not know who they are. And so it again gives you a great foil that even if your player characters get up to 10th level and they're starting to push into that third tier of play, you know, where they're really, really powerful, there's still big guys out there, big ladies out there that can still knock their nose in the dirt. And sometimes you don't even know who that is. And so I really love that the DMG has the demographics section that talks about all the different levels and, you know, from 20th level on down, how many of there are in each city. And that's what I love about this, is that they followed that pretty closely, but there are definitely, I mean, a lot. I mean, not a lot. There's a dozen or 2 dozen 20th level characters walking around the city, and there's good ones and bad ones. And so it gives you a lot of different options in terms of, you have that big bad guy that's working against, you have the big good guy that's working with them, or maybe the good guy is actually in opposition to what the player characters are trying to accomplish. There's so much already written in here that it really is mind blowing. So for you as a new DM trying to digest this for the first time, like I said, start your players. They don't know anything about Ptolus. They're coming in for the very first time. Players, same thing for you. Don't try to play a player the first time you play this campaign, the first time you play a character here, as saying, oh, well, I've lived here all my life, because there's so much information, there's so many idiosyncrasies that there's no way that you're going to be able to play that well, in my opinion, right out of the gate. You can play any character class. There's no restriction. You can play any kind of campaign, political intrigue, just urban crawl, or dungeon crawl. You can play all of that in here. And again, you can play from first all the way up to 20th level with no problem. You could even play a seafaring voyage, right? You leave and you come back into the docks. So again, the sky is really the limit when it comes to what you can do in this city. So DMs, where do I recommend you start reading? Like I said, read a little bit about that Midtown area, mostly just these pieces, because that's going to give you a lot of information. In terms of chapters, where I recommend you start is actually in the Living in Ptolus. I'm sorry, let me scroll up a little bit. The Living in Ptolus section here, which is on being a resident, being a delver, crime and law, technology, chaos attack, and then there's running a Ptolus campaign. So these are at the back of the book, but I would actually recommend you start here. Go campaign advice, urban campaigns, and adventures. These adventures are fantastic. Chapter 33, like I said, there is just a fantastic layout of all the different stuff that you can do and go through here, and it's a great way to get started. But again, it's only, I mean, it's a little bit of reading, but if you read all of chapter 26, it's about 25 pages. If you're getting into chapter 27, where it's on being a delver, again, it's about 20-something pages. Crime and the law is about 20-something pages. Technology, chaos attack. Chaos attack is something you can take or leave with the setting. Read that and check that out. Monte Cook also has a complete book dedicated to chaos attack that you don't have to have, but it is kind of handy. And then the campaign advice, urban adventure, urban campaigns chapters, and the adventures. I would actually start here. These two chapters on being a resident and on being a delver are both really handy in terms of you learning a little bit more about what it's like to be a person living in this city. And so it's going to give you an idea of what your people are dealing with and what your player character is going to see and stuff like that. Then you can dive down and you can go into, for example, just start reading about Midtown. This Midtown is where Midtown is where that Delver Square is located, where most of these places are located, and there's so much stuff they can do without ever even leaving Midtown, you know, let alone all the other options and all the other locations and all of the other work that you can do inside of here. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And so that's my recommendation. This has been a rather long video. If you actually made it this far, I'm really impressed. You must be really excited to start this campaign in this city. If you have any questions, please give me a shout. You can email me on the Ptolus website. I'll also have a website called d20.pub, and so it's not .com, it's .pub. And so So you can actually message me through there and ask me any questions. I run a game on rpol.net. That's where I run my play-by-post campaign. And so I'm working on posting those campaign, translating it from play-by-post into actually posts on the website. And maybe someday I'll actually have a play-by-post forum on the Ptolus website. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. But I hope this has given you ideas on how to start. And again, I hope you do get started. And please let me know when you do, especially if you're posting campaign diaries on Obsidian Portal or anything like that. I love reading them. So thank you very much, and have a wonderful day, and happy gaming.